everyone. Welcome to Beck's Corner. This is the podcast where we talk about apostates from all faiths and the issues they deal with. My name is Obaid Omer. Unfortunately, Nulli and Dean are on walkabout in Australia, so they won't be around. We have two guests with us today, and today we're going to be talking about growing up, coming out as ex-Muslim, and also coming out as part of the LGBTQ community and the issues around that. And with us today are Jimmy Bagnash, who we've had on before. Hey, Jimmy.
Hey, I love the way you say my surname.
And Heina Dadabhoy. Hey,
Hello.
Heina.
How's it going?
How are you? Thanks you both for coming
Uh,
on and talking about this, because I guess it's not it's not going to be an easy topic.
Yeah,
yeah,
thank
no,
you for
I don't
having
I
us.
don't think so. Yeah, thank you for having us. Definitely. I think it's important to talk about, like, to have two comings out is quite a thing, I think.
Yeah,
So I
definitely
thought
agree.
we could start was with you guys just going a bit of your background and the issues you've faced, and then from there, I might have a few questions. If you guys want to, said, well, I didn't, just kind of talk about your experiences and stuff and go from there. So, if Hannah, you want to start that, please?
Sure. So I grew up in Southern California, Muslim family, Sunni background, Gujarati, Desi, all that stuff. Grew up very steeped in religion because my parents had that whole "we don't believe in culture, we believe in religion" BS. So, we were all about Islam, the Quran, all that. We moved to London for a year, as a matter of fact, because my parents thought I could get a better Islamic education out there. It turned me into a mini fundamentalist, of course. Um, so I wore hijab, I prayed, all that good stuff. But I was also very well read in Islam, and as it turns out, the more you know, the less you like. Um, and I was also clearly covering for myself, to make a terrible pun, but like I knew I had attractions to men and to women, or girls and boys at that age. But I thought, oh, that's Allah's test to me. I need to focus on my attractions to boys instead of to girls. Like, I need to just like have the right focus. And that didn't quite work out. I came out as an atheist at 18, and I knew I had latent feelings towards women as well as men, but I didn't really deal with them because I figured out I could pretend to be straight. That didn't work either. And so now I'm out as, bisexual, pansexual, whatever you want to call it, dealing with my gender too. We'll see how that goes. But I am out to my family as an atheist, but not 100% as not straight. Because part of it is, I can kind of get away with it a little bit because I'm married to a guy, and like they don't know I'm not monogamous and that I date women too. So like I can sort of fake it for them, but like that is its own challenge as well. But like we were mentioning earlier, like one of my cousins did Google me and find out that I was bi, and when she did, she refused to let me around her kids for about a year or two until I think, yeah, then I eloped with my now husband, and then she thought, oh, you must be straight now, so it's fine. Suddenly you're not a child molester. It's like, I was never a child molester in the first place. And that was actually very painful for me because I'm still relatively close to my family, and I care about their kids, and I'm always the cool aunt. And, to have that taken away from me was just, it was awful. But I think you had something to say about that too, Jimmy, right?
Yeah, so I guess I've been on your podcast before, right? So I'll be quite swift with my introduction. So I guess, a gay rights activist who has a lot of work to do with the Council of Ex-Muslim of Britain. I also do some work with Face to Faithers, and I work with Yasmin Mohammed on the Free Hearts, Free Mind campaign, which offers um, coaching support to people who are in Muslim majority countries who are now ex-Muslims because they have often nowhere to speak to, no one to speak to, or nowhere to go. And so we really create this space for them so that they can help to just take power and control of their life again. So similarly, I guess growing up, like being gay, I was really aware of having these feelings towards other guys, and just knowing somehow that they weren't right. Like I felt this way, and I knew that I shouldn't articulate it to people at a very young age, and that it should be a secret because it wasn't normative, it wasn't what everybody else was doing. I didn't want to play kiss chase, chasing after girls. I wanted to chase after boys instead. But when I was about 23, around that age, my family found out that I'm gay, and I was disowned for about 10 years and asked to leave the family house. And that had a huge impact on me in terms of just feeling a sense of abandonment by everyone who I thought was supposed to be there for my life. And with the homosexuality, often there's this forced apostasy. So like you can't be gay or Muslim, can't be gay and Muslim. You have to pick one. And because I was quite clear that I was gay, I think it was deemed then that I was an apostate. So there wasn't this sense of choice around my apostasy. It was just like, you're gay, you're not Muslim, get out of the house. And what's quite interesting in that conversation, often what happens when you're talking about homosexuality, in all the years up to the point where I got disowned, whenever I would try to speak to people about homosexuality in the Muslim community, be that imams, be that family members, be that friends, this dialogue always comes up about pedophilia. Like it's always, homosexuality is always linked to pedophilia in our community in the conversation. And it's, well, if we become okay with gays and gay rights, then next we'll be okay with pedophiles. And so there's this linking of pedophilia and homosexuality as if they're both some equitable deviance. So at one point, when my sister knew I was gay, because one of my sisters kind of stayed in touch with me when I was disowned, and I just remember like all of the conversations with my brothers when they found out that I was gay and when I was disowned, like bringing up all of that pedophilia stuff and being disgusted that they shared the same plate and knife and fork with me. All of that, you know, really sort of sense of disgust that they were related to somebody who was gay and how they equated it to pedophilia. And then years later, I remember, several years later, I remember being with my sister's children, and I was staying at home with them while they were out, so I was like babysitting. And her son, who must have been about, I don't know, maybe like 6 or 7 or something, was like play fighting with me, and his trousers came down, his tracksuit bottoms came down, and he was wearing underwear, and then he cracked up and started laughing because his trousers fell down, because he's just a kid, and obviously it was funny for him. But I remembered thinking, oh my God, I have to make sure when my sister comes home, I tell her that his trousers fell down in case he tells her that his trousers fell down, and then it's going to confirm to her that Jimmy's doing something twisted with my son because he's a gay pedophile. And then when my sister came home, I was like, look, we need to have a conversation. Like after the kids had gone to bed, I was like, we need to have a conversation. And she was like, what is it? And it's like, something happened today. Me and Hakeem were play fighting, and his tracksuit bottoms fell down, and so then he quickly pulled him up, but we were laughing for ages about it. And she was like, okay, so what's the big deal? Like, why are you so freaked out by this? And I was like, because when I came out to you, you were talking about gays and pedophiles, and you were equating them as if they're the same thing. So I was worried that if he mentioned it to you, you were going to think this was something that gay people do. You know, like they go around pulling down children's pants or something. Thankfully, my sister was like, I understand that you would never do that now. That was a long time ago. And yeah, and I know that's not the same thing. But it's still I think that story for me, the emphasis is more on the alarm that I felt because of the way that Muslim people equate gays and pedophiles together. Almost like I have to prove that I'm not dirty. And that was really
no, I feel you on that. Yeah. You internalize the shame, you internalize the pain, and you internalize like the way they see you. It goes inside. Like, actually, I recently watched a comedy special called Nanette that was on Netflix. I really recommend it, but she talks about that a lot too, because she's a lesbian, and she says, you know, you end up enforcing it on yourself. And no, I really feel you on that, because even in the United States, like with the fundamentalist Christians out here, they have that same mindset of once you get out of what we think is the proper way to have a romantic and sexual life, you clearly just must think everything's a free-for-all, because they don't see it as a consent issue. They see it as, this is correct sex, this is incorrect sex, and consent doesn't really play a role in the way they conceptualize it. So to them, oh, we're out of the way of doing the things correctly, so we must just do whatever we want, or whatever they presume we want. Where, you know, I think, you know, when you're on this side of things, you think of it as a consent issue, not a matter of does God or whatever rules say that this kind of sex is okay.
Yeah, and I think it's so twisted, isn't it? Because I remember having this issue about, when actually having this conversation, was like, actually, listen, you can't equate pedophilia and homosexuality together, because one of these is about consent, like two adults having a consensual sex, and the other one is about somebody having sex with a child. But I'm laughing because it's just absurd, isn't it? Because then we can look to Yemen, where 40-year-old men are marrying 8-year-old girls, and that is absolutely fine. It's like, it's not even seen as pedophilia. It's just seen as a child marriage, which actually is completely got the blessings of Allah anyway, because Muhammad did the same thing. And when I remember having these conversations with my family and saying, like, well, actually, how are you positioning this to me? Because whenever you say that actually gay people are like, we're like perverts, or we're doing something wrong, all of the things that you keep on listing, so they would list things like pedophilia, list things like incest. I was like, well, those all happen in the Muslim majority countries,
right?
More than they happen in Western liberal democracies. So, like, you're marrying.
Why do they think that the West is this cesspool when they all know what goes on back home too? You know, I visited Pakistan about 10 years ago, and I was covered up. Like, I didn't have hijab on, because, you know, in Pakistan not everyone wears hijab, but I did have my dupatta on. Like, I had a shawl around me and loose clothing, and these men, you know, at the bazaars, like, they all act like you're naked and oiled, just walking around. Like, they just stare at you. They stare and they stare, and, you know, even though we were covered up. And so, you know, and yet somehow when we come back here, if, you know, anyone, so certain people in my family hear about street harassment or rape, they immediately jump to, oh, she must not have been covered properly. And, you know, in the West, they do all these things. It's like, but back home, you experience the exact same thing. So why do you think Islam is some kind of cure when it very clearly is not? But then they play the no true Scotsman game. They say, oh, it's because they're not true Muslims. Well, clearly a true Muslim doesn't actually exist in that case, right?
Exactly. It's interesting. There was this
sorry to interrupt there. Something that you touched on, Heina, that it was like, you know, you hadn't fully come out to your family, and then like how are you feeling as you're growing up? Like, I was just curious about that. Like hearing all that stuff about, like, you know, because I would hear stuff about homosexuals growing up from my parents. So someone who worked with my mom was a lesbian, and just the way she wouldn't say anything overtly bad about the person, but just the way she talked about it, her tone would change. And so it was always told, like, it was always, you know, suggested at least that this is wrong. So, like, growing up like that, like, was there added, I don't want to say shame, but like, did you feel it forced, you know, like were you feeling shame about your own feelings because of what your family was saying and what you were told, like, growing up, or like
oh,
what
yeah.
was harder?
There's no question that was the case. You know, when I was really little, like, gay people didn't come up a lot because, like, you know, I was born in 1988, so things were just, I mean, obviously, you know, a lot of things had already happened, but like your average, like, suburban child would not have heard or seen a whole lot. But then the same-sex marriage referendum came in California, and for a long time in California, they kept introducing these referendums on our ballots, and they kept getting voting down. It just happened. It happened over and over again until finally, they legalized it and there was Prop 8. That's a whole other story. But the fact is that became a conversation all of a sudden. And, people started saying the word gay more as like an insult. And I didn't know what that was. But then someone at my Islamic school, which by the way, my Islamic school was called Straight Way School, believe it or not. Yeah. It's a very bad translation of like Sirat al-Mustaqim, like the correct path or the straight path. It's like these people who are ESL like called it Straight Way School. Okay, fine. So somebody wrote on a tree with Sharpie, "Straight way is totally gay." And in hindsight, right, hilarious. But when it happened, everybody was shocked. And they called a special school assembly for which they had asked every parent for permission first. And they, quote unquote, explained to us what gay was. They said, oh, it was like Prophet Lut's time when men married men and women married women. And we all know what happened to them, right? It's like the Bible's Sodom and Gomorrah story. Like everyone got destroyed because of it. And in hindsight, too, it was funny because same-sex marriage was not legal. So what they meant by married was fucking. They meant sex, but they wouldn't say that. Of course they wouldn't. And, I always, like, there's a thing that happens with kids, like, they call them schoolgirl crushes, where, like, girls will be, like, best friends and holding hands and stuff. And I remember being really into the idea, but every girl I got a schoolgirl crush on thought I was way too intense, and they were probably right. They didn't want to be my best friend because I was clearly a little too into it. So I always felt sort of excluded and alienated. And then when I found out what gay was and that it was bad, that made me feel even worse. And it got even worse as I got older because Muslim girls will do all girls parties so that they can dance and take their scarves off and wear cute clothes and makeup. And I was always the weird one in the corner, still with hijab on, not dancing, not doing anything. Because those parties made me so uncomfortable. And everybody thought it was a sign of how pious I was, but it was really a sign of how gay I was feeling at those parties. Because these girls would be like belly dancing with each other. Like they would go all out. And for me, it was like, it was hot, but I didn't even know how to say that that's what I was feeling. But, I knew it was wrong. And yeah, I did internalize a lot of that shame. And, that's what therapy's for, but I'm still working through it.
Yeah, that is what therapy's for, isn't it? Like that. And it's such a toxic, shame is such a toxic emotion when you internalize it as well. And I think it just plays out in a myriad of ways as you start externalizing it, I guess, and working through it. It's so damaging. And like, one of the conditions for shame to thrive in is that absolute silence, not being able to say, look, this is how I feel, and actually I'm struggling with this. And that's one of the things about homosexuality, isn't it? Because it's such a intense sin, it's such an absolute blasphemous thing to be, that you can't articulate it like how you might articulate other sinful things. That are seen as sinful. Or like, so if you stole something, you might be able to sit down and have a conversation with someone and say, look, I stole some stuff, actually, I feel quite bad about this, I'm sorry, I want to return it. But with your sexuality, if you're highlighting that, there's so many repercussions in terms of getting disowned or being ostracized from the community, that it really is one of the places that is fertile ground for shame to be cultivated.
I agree with that. I mean, I remember even reading Islamic books that talked about how people doubt their faith in Allah. Like, they even said, like, there were even, khutbahs on Friday where they talk about, oh, in the West, it's very tempting to leave your faith. So always talk to, your parents or a sheikh or whoever and, like, talk about your doubts and, we'll work through them. It'll make your faith stronger. But, being gay was just talked about in the context of, oh, these decadent Westerners. As a matter of fact, my mother told me that people were gay in the West because they started having promiscuous straight sex at a young age, and they got tired of the opposite sex, so they looked to the same sex for new thrills. Like, it's always very much viewed as an outside thing. Like, our people don't do this. It's something, it's like, it's a white man's disease, basically.
Definitely a white man's disease. The concept that you explained about the reason people get gay, was totally espoused as well by Dr. Zakir Naik. Like, he
Oh my
was,
God, that guy.
was totally saying, this is why people get gay, because in the West you get to have so much sex, and then they have to experiment with new things, and then they turn to men, and that's why they're gay. That's my best that's my best Pakistani accent, by the way. Like, so yeah, it's really weird, like that people actually believe this. I remember the guy who asked Zakir Naik, this is the video is still on YouTube, and the guy said to him, no, but like there's little kids who are like 12, 13 years old, and they haven't been having sex with anyone, and they know that they're gay. And I knew I was gay by the time I was 12 completely, and I hadn't had sex with anyone, and then Zakir Naik said, well, they're watching porn. Like, it was like they're watching porn, they're watching blue movies, he said, yeah, and that's what's making them gay. It was like, you're plucking this crap out of your ass. Hundreds and thousands of people are watching this dude, if not millions of people are watching this dude on like Peace TV all across the Muslim world, and they're now believing that that's why people are gay, because of too much access to sex of the same gender. Like,
Yeah.
how ridiculous
Like,
is that?
it doesn't make any sense to me either, because I can remember the first time I saw porn, and I was not very little. I was older, and it was online, and I'd already had the feelings I had, like all that. And I
So
think part of it
what
too.
does that mean? Like, what is the equation there? What is the methodology? So if you then took a gay person, you put them in a room, and you made them watch gay porn for like 3 years straight with no break, would they come out of the room and be straight because they just overconsumed on gay porn and would now want to have sex?
Well,
Like,
they'd probably be dehydrated, but
yeah. Might need a lot of hankies in that room as well. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of Gatorade.
Listen, tell me about this. So, I was at an event today with the London Black Atheists. It's like this freedom of conscious event that they had, and there was an ex-Jehovah's Witness there who was also gay, and we were talking about our experience and what things were similar. And one of the things that he said to me, which really resonated, was looking around at other people who were Muslim, and for him looking around at other people who were Jehovah's Witness and saying to God, why is my test so much harder than everybody else's? Like, everybody else is going through whatever test you've given them, but you've made me gay, and that's not fair, because everybody else has got some way to be halal in a relationship, even if like they're having sex before marriage, they can stop that and get married and be halal. But for me, you've made my test so much harder than everybody else's. And why have you done that? And I was really sad about that. He said he was really angry about that with God. But I was like, God, why have you made my test so hard? Like, this is so innate with me. I've been praying for you to take away the gay. It's not going. And I'm just wondering whether you experienced that at all yourself.
Well, being not, having attractions to men and women, it was not quite that way for me. I just thought I had to focus on, quote unquote, the right way of doing things. But I was kind of annoyed with God. I was more annoyed than anything, because I was very pious and I was a very good girl. Like, you could ask anyone in my family, even the people who hate me the most now. I was genuinely pious, and I wasn't even doing it to show off or anything. Like, I had a very genuine faith, and I remember thinking, what, for me, the feelings towards other girls and the feelings of doubt were similar, in that I'm like, God, I'm doing my best here, I'm doing my best to worship you. And, they have that saying, or if you go to Allah walking, he comes to you running. I'm like, where's the running God? I don't see him. I'm doing my best. Like, I would go through periods where I wouldn't even I put in earphones before going into the grocery store so I wouldn't hear music. Like, all kinds of things. Like, I always was trying to be as devout as I could, but I always had doubts about religion, and I always had feelings towards other girls. And God wasn't holding up his end of the bargain. It seemed really unfair to me.
Yeah, really unfair. I think that's another thing that came out was this sense of, it's just not fair. Like, other people aren't going through this kind of struggle. Like, if you want to hit me with poverty, hit me with poverty. If you want to hit me with a disability, that's okay too, God. But actually making me be attracted towards men as a test is just a little bit unfair. And then I think as an adult now with a more rational mind, like just the fact that if you did believe that God was testing people through making them gay, it's really a little bit twisted. Like it's a little bit twisted if that was true. Like if there was a God who was making people gay to make them not have sex with men to prove to him how much they worshipped him. A little bit fucked up, God. But no more.
You know, he sounds. God actually sounds like a really sadistic dominant to me, like the ultimate gay dominant. Like that's what that sounds like to me.
It is. It's like spank me, Allah, isn't it? Yeah. It's actually,
yeah.
I just had a question. Like, sorry, I just had a question. And it's getting back to like coming out as an apostate. And now, Jimmy, I know you said that your family found out you were gay, so that automatically made you an apostate, and then they threw you out of the house. And Heina, like, you've let your parents know that you are an apostate, but you're still kind of fuzzy on the bisexuality. Like, do you think it's a bigger scandal, or I don't like using that term, but like in the mind of your family, is that a bigger scandal? Is that a bigger offense being gay than being an apostate? Like, do you think they would have accepted the apostasy if you'd been married with a wife and you were straight? Like, I'm just curious. Like,
for me, really interestingly enough, before my family found out I was gay, one of my brothers, in front of my dad, asked me, because on the run up to getting found out, I was gay. I think it was becoming more and more evident how much, I don't know, maybe how much I didn't believe in Islam or wasn't bothered by it. Even though I hadn't clearly apostatized in my own head, like just the way I was beginning to dress, just the conversations I would have about women's rights, stuff like that, in the house were making it quite clear. And even the conversations I'd have about gay people's rights, I remember that coming up and saying, well, actually, no, I don't think that they are discussing. I don't think that they should be executed. And so then one day my brother asked me in front of my dad, do you even believe in God? And I was like, maybe, but not, I don't think in the way that you believe it. Like, and I just thought, we're all adults in the room having this conversation. You've asked me a question. I'm going to answer you honestly. And then I remember my dad walking around the house for 2 days. Like he was burning a hole in the carpet. He was just walking up and down the house, walking up and down the house. And on the first day, he was like, I can't believe you said that. This is what you've been doing with yourself. Like, you've been forgetting your religion. And I was like, I don't know what to say to you. Like, I can pretend to believe in God if you want me to and be Muslim, but it's just not true. And then after day 2, where Dad was just like walking around the house, no violence actually, it was quite surprising. So when day 2, when Dad was just walking up and down the house, my sister took me into a room and my brother took me into a room and they're like, why did you say that to Dad? And I was like, look, if you didn't want Dad to know, why were you asking this question in front of him? That's not a sensible thing to do. I just thought we're all adults, we're having a conversation. And then my sister was like, no, tomorrow you have to tell Dad that you were only joking. That's such a bizarre thing. So tomorrow, in true Pakistan, lift up the rug and sweep everything underneath it style, like I went with like a straw broom. I went downstairs and I took my straw broom with me, lifted up the carpet, and said, "No, Dad, I was just joking," and swept it underneath the rug. And then my dad was like, "Oh, okay, cool," and went back to his normal life. So that was really quite an interesting scenario, and I would say that being gay is the worst thing ever, because the minute I was gay, I had to get out of the house, right? Like it was like, get out of here. There was a time where Dad knew I wasn't in believing in Islam for 2 days, albeit, but I wasn't thrown out of the house, and none of my siblings were like, get out of the house. And I think maybe because the levels of religiosity in my house weren't massively high, so maybe it's different in different depending on how religious your family are. But for me, in Islamic communities, gay is like it's just the worst thing ever. Like because there's no coming back from it, is there? Like you can be an apostate and then find your faith again, I guess. But with being gay, everyone knows like that shit ain't changing. So I think it's seen as a bigger deal.
Yeah,
Now,
you're right. Like one, in their view, one necessitates the other. Like if you're gay, then you're clearly out of the fold. Where, if you're out of the fold, you could come back, or maybe you're having doubts. I mean, and they hear what they want to hear. Like you mentioned the story where you said, "Oh, I'm not sure I believe in God," but then you just said it was a joke and they're willing to accept it. When I told my parents I no longer was a Muslim, they didn't even accept it. They thought I was having doubts, even though I had clearly said that. And like they thought maybe I just didn't want to wear hijab, even though I said the words I said. It's they hear what they want to hear. And I know for a fact that my mother still, on some level, holds hope that I'll come back to Islam.
yeah, I think my
No,
mother still hope that I'll come back to being straight in some ways. Maybe. Yeah, I think, and I remember, although I say they know that gay is for life, right? That's not actually true. So when my sister, when I told her I was gay, the first thing that she did was, gosh, she freaked out so badly in so many different ways. But one of the things that she freaked out, one of the ways that manifested was, saying to me, she came to me one day in the kitchen and was like, we can sit down and pray every night for God to make you straight. Like to go, this woman doesn't pray at all ever for anything, right? Like, but all of a sudden she was ready to sit down and do namaz, but with me as well, like to try and, just get in touch with God so that he would make me straight. And I was like, I'm not interested. I'm really comfortable with my sexuality. I'm not interested in doing that. So even though,
Sorry, I just have to interject one little thing. You could have used that to tell them that your homosexuality was actually a blessing because it's getting non-pious people to pray more.
yeah, maybe this is why God had sent the test, was to make people in my family pray more. That's what it is. Yeah, yeah. God, they would actually have latched onto that as a very logical reason if I had positioned it that way. Like people be like, "Oh, see, look, the test that God sent. It's for the best for our whole family." Like, yeah, crazy stuff. So
it is
even though,
true.
like,
There's no better way to make a non-practicing Muslim as Muslim as possible than to be an apostate or to be gay. Because all of a sudden they're the holiest of holies, where before they were, having casual sex and drinking and everything. But if they meet an atheist or an apostate, especially, or someone who's not straight, suddenly they're, Mr. Mullah trying to be all holier than thou.
yeah, I just remember this other thing about being around the kids that we were talking about. Um, like so we went to Tunisia on holiday with my sister and her kids and her husband, and this is what it must feel like to be a Muslim woman, right? So my clothing was policed to not be too gay. So we were going to my sister's husband's house. This is Tunisia. It's really hot and sunny. It wasn't that hot actually, but it was very sunny. And then I put on a vest to go. And she was like, "No, can you take that vest off and put on a t-shirt?" And I was like, "What? Oh, he looks too gay." She was like, "Yeah, just just do it for me." And I was like, "Oh, fuck's sake!" Like I really felt like this is so outrageous. But you do things for your family, right? You just compromise. And so I put on a t-shirt to go to the house. And in addition to that, we never really talked about me being gay anyway. Like she wouldn't ask me about relationships and stuff. It's not something that would come up, but we certainly never would mention anything about me being gay in front of the kids. And I think because my sister teaches her children that being gay is sinful, so by me talking about being gay or boyfriend or anything in front of the kids, it would normalize the sin, I guess. It would make it be, oh, well, hang on, Uncle Jimmy's the cool uncle. He's a lot of fun. If he's gay, maybe it's okay. Like, so I think there was this fear, and the point where we got to where we had to have this conversation, I was like, I'm not comfortable with being treated like I'm some dirty little secret that one day your children are going to find out about. That's such a disgusting way to treat me as your brother. And it really took this head-on conversation to get her to address the topic. And then how she addressed the topic was, yes, Uncle Jimmy is gay. No, it's not okay in our religion. It's sinful. And I think you have to learn sometimes when you've come from a Muslim family to compromise. Like, so, you know, because I would, you know, there's temptation there to push and say, actually, don't describe homosexuality as sin. It's just blatantly homophobic and has really serious repercussions on people, actually. But I think with my sister, I have to learn to, and it's an ongoing struggle, actually, to just park things that we disagree on. Like, actually, that's your religious belief. We're never going to be aligned to this. If I want to have you in my life, if she wants to have me in my life, in her life, we have to learn to park certain things. So she has to park certain things about my activism with me walking around signs saying I love is gay and gay pride. Like, that won't work for her to not park if we're in each other's company. It's a very interesting dynamic, I think, it causes in Muslim families to have like a gay brother or a gay sister or a bisexual person in your life.
Yeah, there's definitely things where my mom and I just don't have certain conversations. Like, I recently got a haircut that is very, like, if it's coded gay, like the side shave and the swoop and all that. Where before I had very traditional, just feminine long hair, and I've been changing the way I dress and things like that. Like, I don't generally wear bras anymore. I've been wearing binders and things, and when I go around family, you know, I can style myself, like, you know, in shalwar kameez and look kind of normal, quote unquote. But what am I supposed to do with my hair, right? So they'll see it. And so on Eid, the last Eid after Ramadan, a lot of my family saw my new haircut for the first time. And when I got my haircut, my mom actually made a point of not saying anything about it. Because I think she kind of knows, but she just doesn't want to have the conversation. My brother said I looked like a cool anime character, which was fine by me. But one of my uncles straight up looked at my haircut, looked at me, and said, "Are you trying to tell us something?"
Ooh.
And my answer was, "What's your problem? I just got a haircut." Like, they don't actually want the answer. Like, you know what you were talking about with your brother asking you the question. They ask all these nosy ass questions, but they don't actually want the real answer. And that's part of why I'm considered a problem in the family. It's not just because I'm like this loud, annoying atheist. It's also because when they ask those stupid questions, I give them a straight answer. Straight. But, you know, I give them an answer and they hate it. They hate that I'm so blunt and that I'm not ashamed.
Yeah, and loaded questions as well. So I remember when my sister asked me if I was gay, she wasn't like, Jimmy, are you gay? She was like, Jimmy, you're not gay, are you? Like, I was like, well, you kind of told me, you've told me exactly how to answer that question in the phraseology, haven't you? Like, there's only one answer to that you're currently comfortable with. So I was like, no, I just have gay friends. Like, she was like, oh, cool, I thought so, yeah. And I was like, what made you ask that? She was like, oh, no, you know, you're quite feminine. And so a few of my friends who are girls have asked, like, oh, is Jimmy gay? And said that you might be, but I told them that you're not. That's just how you are because you've got lots of girlfriends. Oh, gosh. And so that, and then the other thing you said about extended family, crikey. So we're quite fortunate, actually, that we're in the UK, in London, with not much extended family here at all. And none, in fact, no extended family in the UK. But everybody's your auntie, isn't it? Like, everyone's your auntie, everyone's your uncle. And when one of my brothers passed away, and so it was when my brother passed away, I came back home because I hadn't been home and I was disowned, but somebody called me and said, like, your brother's passed away, I think it's time for you to come home. So I was like, okay, cool, let me go back home. And guys, this is quite heavy, actually. So my brother's corpse was on the ground in his bedroom, and it was covered with a cloth. And they delayed the coroner coming because they were like, oh, Jimmy's going to come home, so you should see the body before they take it. And in the room, my mum was sat on the bed crying, and next to her was an auntie who's Pashtun, so she speaks the same language as my family, who I'd known since I was a kid. And when I went to hug my mum, and my brother is lying on the floor dead, the first thing that auntie said to me was, "Don't do disgusting things." And I thought, you guys are ruthless. Like, you're just ruthless. Like, you haven't spoken to me for how long? Look at the situation we're in, and the first thing you want to talk about is where I'm shoving my dick. Like, how messed up is that? It's just so... And then this is the thing, I think, is like, homophobia in our community is just legendary. Like, if anybody ever wanted to learn the school of homophobia, come to the Islamic community, because it will supersede anything. Like, in such a traumatic situation, the thing to talk about is not, hey, are you okay? Is actually reference this person's sexuality and criticize them for it.
They're really, really interested in policing certain aspects of people who they consider to be part of their community. You know, it's their priority. Like, in your case, the priority was not, comforting you or welcoming you back, after this exile. The priority was policing your behavior to what they thought was an acceptable standard. And recently I've been wrestling with that a lot, because my mother is finally divorcing my father. My father is horrible, just a horrible man, textbook narcissist abuser. And when I was growing up, people saw the abuse happening to me and my mother, my sister, and they didn't do anything. They never said anything. They never did anything. They just let him do whatever he wanted, because, as long as we looked like a nice family and I didn't have bruises on me that were visible, no one cared. But when I became an atheist, everyone and their mother, all the fake aunties and uncles, real aunties and uncles, everyone was calling me, everyone was trying to get me to be a Muslim again. And they were all blaming my dad's behavior for my atheism. And I said, first of all, my dad's abuse did not make me an atheist. But if it did, why didn't you intervene about the abuse if all of a sudden you're capable of intervening about my atheism? And it's just their twisted priorities in so many ways. They care more about the optics. They care more about what the community looks like, more than actual human beings and feelings. And it is honestly so deep, I don't even know what to do with it. I don't even know if anything can be done about it, except wait for a certain generation to die off and hope that our generation does better. I don't really know what the answer is, but it's been bothering me a lot lately.
Yeah.
Well, when I told my parents about my apostasy, the conversation went on for a couple of days, right? But at the end of it, they said, just don't tell anyone, because we don't want to have shame on the family, right? And my response to that was, you're more concerned about your standing and what you will look like to the community than you are about my immortal soul, apparently. And that didn't go over too well, but it's ludicrous, because, like, you're right, it's what will the other people think, right? And so they're more concerned about that than anything else.
And what's funny too is, if you scratch the surface even a little bit, every single family within the community has some kind of scandal. Literally none of them are free from sin, especially when you're the black sheep like me. They all come to you with their problems and the bad things they've done, which is funny. I'm not a black sheep for any immoral reasons, but people come to me to tell me about the affairs they had. And I'm like, excuse me, I think I'm actually a better person than you, because I'm not cheating on my wife of many years, but okay. But, you find out that they all have these issues, and things become worse and they fester because everything is so hidden. You have kids who, multiple relatives of mine have been in horrible relationships because they couldn't tell their parents about the relationships, and there was no one to look out for them. So they ended up in abusive relationships because no one knew about the relationship. A lot of them abused alcohol and drove drunk and things like that, because God forbid their parents found out that they were drinking, but they were engaging in all kinds of unhealthy behaviors, and it's horrifying, really.
Yeah. There's this thing, isn't it, about God, when I put this together, I was like, this is so messed up. But lying is respect. Like
Mm-hmm.
once you unpack this, that we live in a culture of lying is respect. So if you smoke your cigarette down the end of the road in an alleyway somewhere, um, rather than letting your mum and dad know, listen, guys, I'm 20 years old and I smoke, right? That would be disrespectful to say to your parents or to have a cigarette in the house or in the back garden of your house to say, hi, mum, I smoke, I'm a smoker, I'm just going to have a cigarette in the back garden. That would be seen as so disrespectful to your Muslim family, right? And it's probably a South Asian thing as well, not just a Muslim thing. And actually, some of my African friends would say the same thing. So it's quite an ethnic thing. But similarly, like if you said, actually, I've been out drinking with some girls after work, and or mum, I've got a girlfriend, right? Like that would be like really disrespectful to say to your parents. But if you have a girlfriend and she's not Muslim as well, and you're hiding it, your peers kind of think that's the right thing to do. Even your parents would think it's the right thing to do because you're not disrespecting them. So this equating of transparency and honesty to disrespect, and therefore lying and secrecy to respect, is literally the most twisted thing that we have going on. It's so, so damaging.
And it's really hard for certain kinds of kids because I was a very literal minded child and I was very pious. So to me, telling the truth was important because Allah didn't say to lie, He said to say the truth, right? And
Yeah,
my whole family said we care about the truth. So I was honest with them and it always bit me in the ass. It always
yeah,
did
it's
because
completely.
everybody else was lying about literally everything. You know, oh,
Yeah,
let's talk about the marriages in my family. So I have an honest, state marriage. I'm legally married. I didn't do the fake Islamic marriage thing. But there are so many people in my family, girls who have husbands who quote unquote converted to Islam because they just said Shahada and somehow that makes it okay. And they all are walking around with fake Muslim husbands, but I'm the bad person because I didn't do that.
when you say
Even though
fake
it,
Muslim husband, is that because they haven't had the legal wedding, they've just had the Islamic wedding?
oh no, they usually have both.
Okay,
in, in,
okay.
in the case
So
of my
what do you
family, but
mean? What do you mean? Oh, fake as in like,
they're
like they
fake
just took the
Muslims.
shahada, they don't really believe it. Okay, I
Yeah,
see. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's happened a lot. Like
we
that does
call them
happen a lot.
Cupid's Muslims, right? You
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
it's but somehow that's good and that's okay. You know.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, there's a real bizarre relationship to the truth, I feel like, in Muslim communities. Also, I put this down to this concept of punishment and sin. So, if in our religion, like if you do a sin, it's written in your book, and then it's just going to weigh you down on the day of judgment, right? So, if every time you acknowledge that you do a sin or you take responsibility for your action, which is a sin, it still goes into your book and it's going to weigh you down. And sin equals punishment. So therefore, taking responsibility for something bad that you did is going to get you in trouble. And often, I think we find in we were having a conversation on your podcast last time about the way that violence is used as a tool for discipline. Yeah, in Islamic houses a lot. And again, if you put your hand up and said, "Oh look, I did this wrong," that might lead to violence or it might lead to aggression. So this sense of distancing yourself from the truth is quite self-preservation. Like actually something I'm doing something, so let me be deceitful about it. Let me lie about it. It preserves you. It's one, it stops you from acknowledging that you're committing a sin because nobody knows about it. You're not being transparent about it. So therefore, you're not acknowledging that it's even going in your bad book for Judgment Day. Secondly, you've done something bad. Mum and dad are never going to find out about it because, and that means you won't get beaten or disciplined um, or told off. So it's really self-preservation as opposed to you do something wrong, you take responsibility for it, and you say, "Hi guys, I'm doing this. I know you disagree. I think it's okay. We just all have to learn to get along."
Yeah, and for me as a devout Muslim, it was really tough because when I realized that everyone expected me to lie, I thought that was additional sins for me. You know, it's like, not only am I not allowed to make mistakes, but I can't even acknowledge them and try to seek forgiveness from Allah. Instead, I have to lie and add to my sin burden.
Yeah, completely. And I think that bringing that back to homosexuality, like that was just like the ever ongoing lie, wasn't it? Or bringing it back to not being straight, actually, not even just homosexuality, so with you're bisexual as well, is like this ongoing eternal lie that you just have to maintain forever. And that's what it felt like. It really felt like I'm going to have to live this life forever, because you can't be open and honest about it in this community.
And, you know, it's stressful and it's harmful.
No, but it's also like, I mean, like you're talking about all the lies you have to live. Everyone is living false lives. Like you said, you know, they lie about everything. Every family's got some little hidden secret, whatever. And so, it didn't matter if you're an apostate as long as you didn't talk about it, you know, or like in your guys, you know, it doesn't matter if you're gay, it doesn't matter if you're bisexual, just don't talk about it. You know, keep it to yourself and be private. And it's, I mean, they don't teach you any kind of way to cope and to grow up. Like it's all you're dealing with generation after generation of like perpetual children, emotionally, anyways.
Yeah, completely. I think I agree. It's like the best ex-Muslim in our community is one who's be quiet, just shut up about it. And also the same goes for the best homosexual, right? It's like there's so many people who are gay in the community who may still be Muslim, or who are ex-Muslim and gay, and you know the party line very much is, okay, if you're going to do this, don't tell people, just keep it quiet. And so you have like gay guys who are married who are having like loads of gay sex. They're married to a woman having loads of gay sex. People kind of know what's going on in their family, but are not scrutinizing it because they don't want to bring it to light. That is so toxic for those individuals. Like just not being able to be yourself, and the lives of the women that it's ruining, the impact it's having on the children and that family. It's just so messed up. Our ability, I think, as a community to have very transparent conversations is limited. And I think, Hina, I agree with you. It's really sad. I just think like we're going to have to wait for a generation to die out. And actually, a lot of the influences that we see, a lot of the Western influences that we're seeing in our diaspora communities are actually infiltrating them. So I think the fact that we're having this conversation shows that actually we're opening up to these influences, and we're beginning to understand that actually, secrecy and deceit surprisingly doesn't make for healthy relationships and a healthy community, which has been the strategy that we've been doing for so long. So I do think that it's about like a whole realm of people are just going to have to die out, and younger people are going to start adopting more transparent ways of being, and that will really help our community. And I think it's not just diaspora communities. So even when you look on social media, and you look all across like the Middle East, if you look at Iran, you've got women taking off their headscarves and dancing in the streets because they've had enough of being in the closet and being subdued and being secretive about their desires and their wants. So we're starting to see this need for transparency, this need to articulate themselves and have it present and have this sincerity and honesty present in their existence.
Yeah.
Sorry, just touching on that for 1 second. When you're talking about, I mean, you mentioned like who's gay and Muslim. Like you have the mosque in Germany now. There's a couple in Canada. Or there's one for sure just outside of Toronto called the Unity Mosque, where they have support groups for LGBT community. They accept people who are gay and are Muslim. And I mean, I've seen debates where Muslims saying, well, if you're gay, you can't be Muslim. and then this Muslim guy saying, "Well, no, I am Muslim, I believe, but I'm also gay." Like, do you think there's any chance of that kind of growing, or is that again like waiting for a generation to die off?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So if you had asked me this about a week ago, gay Muslims were not high on my love list actually. So I've met with a couple of gay Muslim organizations, and I've really done so in the spirit of, listen, we've got common enemies who hate us both. We should be supporting each other, gay ex-Muslims and gay Muslims. And whilst I respect your right to believe in this, you know, this misogynistic, homophobic religion of a sky god who's going to throw people in hell, same way you should respect and support my right to blaspheme about that same religion. But that support is only one way. My experience has been that actually, you know, gay ex-Muslims and ex-Muslim organizations are very supportive of gay Muslims and say, craft a space, we'll help you craft a safe space for yourself in your communities. But the response back to us is actually, you empower bigots, you're Islamophobic, or a whole realm of unnuanced statements. But you have got, in the UK, you've got an organization called Iman and another organization called Hidayah, who both create spaces for gay Muslims to exist. And I think there's a spectrum of gay Muslims. So some gay Muslims are absolutely fine with their sexuality and their faith and reconcile it fine. But then on one side, you have gay Muslims who really lead with their Muslim identity, and they secondary have their sexuality. So that you'll find people in this part of the spectrum in Muslim spaces who are putting their sexuality second. And what that means is their commitment to Allah is stronger than their commitment to being gay. And so they might be married to a woman, they might be celibate, and on the other side of the spectrum, you have people who lead with their gay identity, and their Muslim identity comes second. And so these guys and girls are usually in gay clubs and bars, in gay spaces, and Islam comes secondary to them. But for both groups, and this is not by no means all of them, but for both groups, it plays out in really weird and wonderful ways. So for people who lead with their Muslim identity when they're gay, they end up often having sex in the back of cars in dark alleyways, very illicit sex that doesn't fulfill them on an emotional level, and then go back home to their wife and kids. And on the other end of the spectrum, you might have gay identified Muslims who are having sex with men and in fulfilling relationships, but in the darkness of night on their own, feeling really toxic shame because ultimately Allah is telling them that they are a sin and they're unable to reconcile that. You know, hashtag not all. There are some gay Muslims who are absolutely fine at reconciling this. So you have organizations like Iman and Hidayah, but whenever these organizations seem to do an event like LGBT fast breaking, like during Ramadan when they break their fast, like a LGBT iftikar, it's done in a church or in a community hall because no mosque is going to have them. Like no mosque is allowing them to use their spaces to hold a gay event. And I don't know how far away we are from that. It feels like because these organizations have been around. Iman has been around for at least 10 years. And I know in 10 years, not one mosque has allowed you to use their space. And then we have something else called the Inclusive Mosque Initiative. And they've had like a woman lead the prayer. You can come with your hijab, without your hijab. You can pray however you are. And men and women pray side by side. This is a very, very liberal mosque initiative that they have. I think it runs about once a month. And again, they don't seem to be holding that in a mosque. They're holding it in a church or in a community hall. I shouldn't laugh. But it just shows how bad Muslim community is in terms of it being inclusive to other people, because they're like, actually, homosexuality is sinful and it's evil. We ain't having a bunch of gays breaking their fast in our mosque in an LGBT event. Fuck your rainbow flag.
It's
Yeah, I have met with a group called Masjid, that's the Muslim Alliance for Sexual and Gender Diversity. It was actually at Creating Change, which is the United States biggest premier LGBT rights conference. And before that, I didn't really think much of it, but I met with this group because I was running sort of a recovery from religion kind of workshop, and they saw that I was ex-Muslim, and they thought, oh, this person must be engaging in anti-Muslim bigotry. But then they met with me and they realized that's not what was going on. And I met with them, and we met for lunch, and I wanted to get bacon and I didn't, but then one of them had gotten it and I said, oh, I should have gotten it. So it turned out that there was more commonality, at least with those particular individuals from that group. They just seem to have a really strong attachment to the concept of being Muslim and of belief that I just didn't have. They seem to have some kind of relationship with their concept of a god and stuff that I just didn't. And for me, it was never, I never loved Allah. I was just scared of Allah. And so they seem to have a different relationship. But yeah, it does vary. You're right. There are LGBT Muslim groups that are very hostile to ex-Muslims because they think that we're just, I don't know, paid Zionist shills or something. I don't know. But, there are some who I think we have more in common with. So it's a mixed bag there. And to them, I really say, I hope they can make a difference. I hope they can get the community to be more accepting as a whole. Because, I don't care where it comes from that much. I care more about, individuals, about human beings within those communities having more freedom, having more choices, and having less shame and stress, whatever religious end they end up with, atheist or Muslim.
I agree. So a couple of things though, sometimes it feels like these organizations are begging at the door of their oppressor for some breadcrumbs for lunch, and then
yeah,
they throw them some crumbs and they're like, oh, thank you, master. It's really disgusting, actually. I'm like, have some self-respect. You shouldn't be begging at the door of homophobic, hate-filled institutions, mosques who pull in hate preachers who say that homosexuals should be killed under Sharia state. Distance yourself from working with those mosques. Find other progressive Muslims to work with. But it often feels like they're really begging for acceptance. And this is why I have so much more respect for the ex-Muslim movement, because I'm like, we don't care about your respect. We're not begging for your respect. In fact, we're going to call out the absurdities and the hypocrisy in our community, and we're going to place it under scrutiny. So one of the things that I think has brought conflict with gay Muslims and the Council of Ex-Muslim of Britain was when we walked in Gay Pride and we held signs saying Allah is gay. That really upset some gay Muslim people, and it was like, you're just being provocative. And it was like, actually, look, we support your right to be gay Muslims, and your existence is provocative. To so many people in the Muslim community, it's offensive for people to be walking around in Pride saying, oh, I'm gay and Muslim. And across the whole world, some people would be outraged at that concept. But that offense is okay. But when we hold up signs saying Allah is gay and we're blaspheming because our whole lives of ex-Muslim are often sought to be confined by Islam, so only by blaspheming can we liberate ourselves from those confines, then you don't want to support us. So your blasphemy is okay because you don't see it as blasphemy, but our blasphemy isn't okay because it's not. It goes past your barometer of offense.
I don't understand that. Sorry, I'm probably going to express myself really badly here, so please forgive me any misspoken words. But okay, so if you're gay and you're Muslim and you can reconcile that, that's, if you can make yourself happy, live that way. But taking offense at a sign, if you're Muslim and you're gay and you reconcile that, but then getting offended at a sign that says Allah is gay because that's blasphemy. I mean, the only reason that's blasphemy is saying Allah is gay is a bad thing. So, if you reconcile that within yourself, how can you then say it's a bad thing to say about Allah? Like that, I don't get.
So you're not supposed to personify Allah. So definitely, I think there's most of that.
Yeah.
When we held Allah is gay, actually, the reason people gave is like, oh, you're not supposed to personify Allah. But I always say to that, actually, if I was at a Black Civil Rights March and I said Allah is black, people wouldn't be that offended. If I was at the Women's March and I held a sign saying Allah is female or Allah is woman, I don't think people would be as outraged in the same way as they were by a sign at gay pride saying Allah is gay. Like, that shit was some next level blasphemy. We all know we hate gays more than we hate any other aspect in Muslim communities. So being gay is worse than being a woman. Being gay is worse than being anything else, right? Or it's worse than being black.
And they also see being gay as inherently sexual, I think.
Yeah, completely.
You know, and so it's basically saying that God sucks dick, you know, like that's kind of what they see it as. But what I find funny too is like with those certain types of gay Muslims like you were talking about, I think part of it is they're trying to be quote unquote one of the good ones. Like they're playing this respectability game of, oh, we're not provocative, you know, we're the nice ones. You know, we're just gay, but we're nothing else. And you know, sucking up to your oppressor like that doesn't actually work. Like if they look at history, they'll see that, you know, people who, you know, your very existence is considered angering and provocative. So not being yourself isn't going to make them love you more.
Sucking up to your oppressor has never worked. And I was having this conversation on the panel that we did at Council of Muslims of Britain, was like, I'm not going to frame my protest in words that appease my oppressor. I'm not going to knock at their door begging for access, because that has never happened. Like when we look at Gandhi in India, it wasn't by saying, oh, please, colonialists, please. You know, that didn't happen. Rosa Parks didn't get off the bus. These things were equally, if not more offensive than somebody with a placard saying Allah is gay in their time, right? And it's only through actually pushing through the boundaries that your oppressor sets that you actually end up liberating yourself. And gay Muslims should walk around with some Allah is gay signs, in my opinion, and be like, screw you, community. We're going to do whatever we want. We're going to craft this space for ourselves. But the problem is that what they're looking for is not a space just to be crafted by themselves. They're also looking for, as a priority, acceptance from the same community that hates them. And don't get me wrong, like one of my goals is to broaden the definition of Muslim and have ex-Muslims included in that, because I'm like, if you think ex-Muslims aren't part of the Muslim community, you're deluded. We're living in your houses, wearing a hijab, cutting up the halal meat for your dinner, right? Like we're in your house, we're part of your community. And I think we need to get to a place where someone says, Mum, I'm ex-Muslim, and Mum's like, yeah, great, just put the kettle on. You know, that's the kind of the level of acceptance that I want to have. But I'm not going to compromise our message or our stance of actually having inherent human rights to express ourselves in order to get that acceptance. And I feel often gay Muslims are willing to compromise themselves in that way. And I find that quite absurd because it's ahistoric. There's no examples in history showing us that when you pander to your oppressor, they give you a level of respect and acceptance.
And besides, if we didn't exist, who would those people have to feel superior to? We're doing a public service.
Yeah, it's true. And we stretch the boundaries.
I don't want to take up too much of your time, guys. I mean, like, you're being very generous. I have one last question. But if you guys want to keep going, your guys are good with it. I know, Jimmy, it's late for you. Like, I'm happy to sit here and sit back and listen to you guys talk. Because my question, like the last one I really want to touch on is, recently in Canada, a mosque in Ottawa got its tax exempt status revoked, and the revenue agency had proof of extremist speakers coming in, like homophobic, misogynistic, just like anti-Semitic, everything, right? So all they've done is pull the tax credit. Now, it's a big thing. You hit them in the purse, right? But there was, in 2013, I believe, there was a priest in Quebec, a Catholic priest, who went on a tirade from the pulpit about how he would never perform a gay wedding in his church because it goes against his faith. Now, he's reporting his faith correctly, as a very literal sense, but he got given a 6-month suspended sentence, and he's not allowed to speak in public ever again. And I know that there was a couple of preachers in the UK who also got in trouble. One was not in church; he was just protesting on the street against homosexuality, and he got fined or sentenced to short-term jail time. It happened in Sweden as well. Like, what? Like, that must frustrate you almost as much as, like gay Muslims or whatever. Like that kind of unequally applying the law, and you're attacking churches. And I'm rightfully so. If you want to attack, like a priest for saying something like that, that's not my issue there. But you're not applying that law equally. Like, I think in the UK it's worse than US. But
so we had a mosque, East London Mosque. We had a mosque called the East London Mosque. Sorry, were you done, Obaid? I just jumped in there.
Yeah, sorry, I was done.
So we had a mosque called the East London Mosque, which has had numerous hate preachers, I'd say, who have come across. One of the things that they did probably about 6-7 years ago was they had some sheikh come, and he did a PowerPoint presentation, and it said "Spot the Fag," and it had like Elton John on one side and Tupac on the other side, and people had to choose which one was the gay guy. And I mean, for me, that happening in London is just hideous. Like that's happening in London, and so obviously somebody took a picture of it and posted it on social media, and it blew up. And then the mosque apologized and said it wouldn't have any more hate preachers, and it invited some more hate preachers who said that, oh, we don't kill gays here, but in a Sharia country we would kill them. That's the proper punishment for them, but not over here. We don't kill them here. And just crazy shit like that. And so then Oxfam, I don't know if you guys are familiar, there's a charity called Oxfam, which is quite big in the UK. They are international, I think. And so Oxfam were going to do an event with the East London Mosque, and then found out about these preachers that they'd hosted, and said, we don't want to work with you. Yeah, like actually we refuse to work with you because you've had some hideous people come and speak at your events. And then again, the mosque was like, oh no, we're sorry, we won't do this again. Then Peter Tatchell, one of our biggest gay right activists in the UK, reached out to the mosque several times, said, let's work together. They refused to come back to him and work with him. And then in that same area, people started putting up stickers saying, no gays welcome in this area. And the mosque went public and said to take down these stickers. The one good thing it's done around homosexuality. So we called out this mosque on our Gay Pride March with some banners saying East London Mosque incites murder of gays. And then Iman, after the Gay Pride March, issued a press release against us supporting East London Mosque, saying that they told people to take down the stickers. Fortunately, Peter Tatchell, who's a gay rights activist, was like, this organization is not interested in gay rights. The peace speakers that they've hosted are horrendous. Well, I've spoken to a couple of members of Iman, like, you've still got that press release up. How is it you're not taking it down? And then they issued Iman, and this is what I mean about begging at the door of your oppressor. Like, Iman threw us under the bus as gay ex-Muslims, and then said, oh, we invite East London Mosque to come and meet with us and host one of our events. Obviously, like 2 years later, East London Mosque are not remotely interested in any event with these gay Muslims, and they're going to hellfire selves. And it's like, you just threw us under the bus to appease your oppressor and beg for some attention from them. They gave you nothing. They love you not. Stop turning on people who are actually fighting the same people who are trying to get you killed. Like the stuff that they're saying in that mosque about gay people applies to people like Iman, and we're sticking up and standing up for you, but you want to go begging these people who literally hate gay people for acceptance and permission. Crazy, absolutely crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say something, but okay. So to go back to the selective targeting thing, that's very much a thing in the United States where, there's a lot of white Christians, especially, who love going after, in those mosques they preach misogyny and they preach homophobia, but their own churches are doing the same thing. And it is very frustrating because in the United States, at least, I can pretty confidently say that most churches have more power than most mosques. as far as the political is concerned. Proposition 8, the anti-same-sex marriage initiative in California, was almost like it was hugely funded by the Mormon Church out of Utah. And, although they get more hate than your average Christian group because they're considered more heretical by most Protestant and Catholic groups. But at the same time, it's like, can we go after bigotry equally and not use it as an excuse to feel superior? You get people who love my story as an ex-Muslim and the misogyny and homophobia I've faced as a way to say, oh, Muslims are just so much worse. And I'm like, well, are your gay kids coming out to you safely? No, they're not. There are gay camps for teens or anti-gay camps where they try to pray the gay away, and they torture these kids and, try to reform them. And, all this is still going on. So, there's a lot of house to clean up as far as homophobia goes. And while Muslims are a big part of it, they're certainly not the only part of it.
Yeah, I think that's true. You've just reminded me of gay exorcisms as well. Like, sorry, when you were talking about something, I was just like, I have a friend who in the UK came out to his family, his Muslim family, and they tried to do an exorcism on him. Like, that you can even go to a place in London and have someone try to do an exorcism on your son for his sexuality or anything, actually. I just sometimes I'm like, am I living in the 21st century in London, or am I in a village in Pakistan somewhere? Because how is that even accessible? And I mean, I do live in a part of London which is a heavy Muslim population, so sometimes it does feel like a village in Pakistan, especially with the rise of the niqab everywhere. Now that I go, I see so much niqab, which when I was in Pakistan, I didn't even see. So it's a bit weird it's a bit weird seeing more niqabs in the UK than it was in Pakistan. So, but yeah, the other thing about mosques and treating things equally, I think, what is the safeguarding policy for children in terms of checking for criminality of imams and sheikhs? Like do they have some kind of, so we have something called a disclosure and barring check, where somebody's criminal convictions are checked if they want to work in a position with children or vulnerable adults or the elderly. Like if you had a job doing that, you'd go through a disclosure and barring check, and it would check you for the criminal records of the past, any convictions that you might have, anything in terms of sexual convictions as well. And I'm like, when you become an imam, is anyone doing that shit? They're not, right? Like, you just become an imam and you have access to working with children, and nobody's checking your record or background in this way. And I find that quite alarming, actually. And we were at this event today with London Black Atheists. One of the guys from Australia challenged the lack of legislation in the Jehovah's Witness community around people working with children, because in the Jehovah's Witness community, if they have this, like how we have the 4 male witnesses rule to a rape happening, they have the 2 witness rule. So like if a child reports that they have been sexually abused, they're like, oh, was there another witness there whilst your paedophile was abusing you? And as we all know, that's not really how paedophiles tend to operate. They don't wait for another witness to be present before they start their predatory behavior on children. So then if there's not a second witness, then they have to just leave it in the hands of Jehovah. And that's their process for looking at child molestation. And this dude, who was an ex-Jehovah's Witness, was instrumental in pushing through legislation to ensure that people who work with children in the Jehovah's Witness community have to go through some sort of legislative check or some background check to ensure that they haven't got some criminal convictions in place that, would indicate that they're not safe people to put children in their hands. And I was thinking, when he said this, I thought, God, we don't do that in our community with imams. Like, your imam just comes and everyone's like, okay, it's an imam. We'll believe that because he's an imam, he's going to be super pious and not do anything sinful. But we know that's not the truth, and yet we don't put anything in place.
Yeah, the lack of vetting of people who work with children due to religious institutional sort of exemptions. It's a problem here in the U.S. too. In fact, I've been reading exposés of daycare centers that straight up abuse kids, neglect them, they end up dying, places burn down, all kinds of horrible things. But because they're attached to a church, they're allowed to be uncertified and uninspected because, religion takes precedent. It's terrifying.
Well, I mean, okay, getting back to the pedophilia thing that you brought up earlier, like equating, and I don't want to say getting back to the pedophilia thing, but what is it? There's only 2 states in the United States that have a minimum marriage age. So,
yep,
all the other 48 states, you can have like girls as young as like 12, I think, getting married. And
yeah, it's
so
the only thing on that is they have to have parental consent. But with fundamentalist religious people, they do.
And I agree with you, like what you said about the United States and even Canada, because I mean I think in the U.S. it's like 1 or 2% of the population is Muslim, so you're looking at like 3 to 6 million Muslims out of a population of 325 million. So the fundamentalist Christians are the ones who are driving a lot of this stuff, like that new task force that you have with the Religious Liberties Task Force that Sessions just pushed through.
Yeah,
like it's basically protection for the Christian right. So in the States, like, and this is getting a little off field here, like I don't discount the trouble that Islam could cause due to extremism and terrorism, but changing policy and changing laws, the Christian right in the States is far more dangerous.
Yeah, you know what, Obaid, I don't really pay much attention to Christianity and what they're up to, and because I'm like, Christians are quite good at handling their nutters. Like I really do feel like they're on the ball, looking at their religion, making sure that it doesn't step too much out of line. And because people do hit me with
yes and no.
Yeah, but
no, sorry.
I feel like
it's just okay. Like I'm just going to interrupt. Like the pedophilia thing with the Catholic Church, and it's still going on, where they're just moving priests from one parish to another. They're not really dealing with it. Ratzenberger, before he was the Pope, he was the prefect of the Order of the Faith, which is what the Inquisition became, and he had written a letter to all the bishops, which is then supposed to be given out to all the priests and everything, right? If you spoke about pedophilia in the church to someone outside of the church, you would face excommunication. Francis hasn't rescinded that. So, yes, they stand up to certain things, but at the same point, there's recently now prosecutions going on and they're being highlighted, but that's not coming from the church. That's coming from the community. The church is still hiding that and moving people around and being pretty sick about it.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I just think when I look at, so what you're looking at is like pedophilia committed by people and it being seen as wrong by wider society. Yeah, like actually there's a general condemnation. It comes out as a dirty secret, and then I compare that to like rows of children getting married to 40-year-old men in public in Yemen, and everyone celebrating it as a norm. And that's the difference for me. It's like at least one society recognizes this is a heinous thing to do. It's disgusting. It needs to be curtailed. Whilst the other community is saying, mashallah, our daughter's getting married to a 40-year-old man. Okay. And we see that, like, not just in Yemen, so we see this in Afghanistan, we see this in Pakistan. The more rural it is, the more likely it's to happen. And then when it's challenged, like when you're challenging pedophilia in the church, the wider community is saying this is disgusting. When you're challenging child marriage in Saudi Arabia, Iran, Yemen, Pakistan, Afghanistan, the wider community is saying Muhammad did this, is okay.
Okay, I agree with you 100%, and I've made that point as well. Okay, this wasn't like whataboutery, right?
Yeah.
When it comes out in the open in the West, people in general are disgusted by it.
Mm.
In Muslim countries, not so much. You know,
Not so
here
much.
and there, individual people might be disgusted, but overall, the society applauds it, like you said. But in the States, the religious, and this is maybe only the best thing because I know Europe is a lot more secular. In the States, the religious right has a large political backing, and they can push through a lot of stuff. Like they're the reason why a lot of these states still haven't banned underage marriage. Like I know in
Yeah,
Quebec,
I
I
was
think it's
about to
the age
say
of
that
16.
homophobia has a lot to do with it. Like people are more disgusted by adult men abusing underage boys than they are by adult men marrying girls. I mean, even in the U.S., there's I forget his name. He's a Republican politician. Was it Roy Moore? Roy Moore. That's right. That's his name.
Yeah,
He quote unquote dated very much underage girls as an adult, and his justification for it was, oh well, in the Bible, Mary was 14, and while there was some outrage about it, it wasn't as much as I thought there would be, because as long as it's straight pedophilia, that's fine, but gay pedophilia, we can't have that.
That's so
it's
true. That's
it,
very
no, but
true.
it's
Yeah.
no, but it's I think it's also like um, I'm trying to remember when it was, but it was in like the early 2000s. The FLDS, so basically fundamentalist Mormons, had a um, ranch in Texas that the ATF and I believe the FBI as well raided, and they were pulling out these young girls that were being married off to these old men, and these young girls were like, in these homespun prairie dresses, and they were like, no, no, this is our religion, we want to do this, and there was no outcry from the general community. Now, if that had been a ranch of Muslims and you were doing this to brown people, like the people were like, oh, you're racist, you're this and that.
Mm.
Um, so it's like it's that that I really get pissed off at. Like, it's pedophilia is pedophilia. So you're not going to change the laws to allow it in your, to not allow it in your state. But then you're going to bust this ranch because you're marrying off little girls, and everyone's fine with it. But if they busted a Muslim ranch with brown people on it, you would have freaked out because the police is oppressing brown people, right? And it's something I'd said a long time ago, and I think I might have said it on the last podcast. Was the last time we were on? It was like they can't see the victims for the brown people when it comes to Muslims.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very true. Very true. Very true. You know the
I actually recently was angry about that because, I had all these, white liberal types who were, obsessed with hijab. They think hijab's so beautiful and cool or whatever. Like they kind of fetishize it. But they're the same people who criticize purity culture in the United States, like the culture of purity balls and girls pledging their virginities to their fathers. And these girls, if you ask them, would say, "Oh, it's my choice. I chose to be, pure until marriage." But they're like, "Well, you can't be. There's no way you made that choice freely." But then when a Muslim girl says, "Oh, I'm wearing it of my free choice," they're like, "Oh, well, she clearly wasn't influenced by anybody. We have to protect her choice at all costs." So yeah, there definitely is a hypocrisy there where, they can understand that society influences their own people, but people outside of it, they can't.
I have quite a nuanced relationship with the conversation about hijab and even niqab, actually. So for me, there's a challenge. So I hate the hijab. I do. I hate the hijab. I hate the niqab. I feel like they're both just objects of misogyny and Islamic patriarchy, completely designed to control women and their sexuality. And obviously, like any symbol in Islam, we've completely internalized it and glorified it and made it a beautiful thing, regardless of how hideous it is. But at the same time, the facts are that actually the front line of anti-Muslim violence targets hijabi women in Western liberal democracies. So in our diaspora communities, when somebody wants to spit on a Muslim, they can see a hijabi, or if they want to attack someone, they can see a hijabi, and they go for that easy target. And I think, so when I watch TV now, things like Grey's Anatomy, The Walking Dead, they've all got hijabi characters in them all of a sudden, right? This happened in the last year or so. And so some friends have been like, oh, they're glorifying hijab. And I'm like, I don't think they're glorifying hijab. I think what they're trying to do is normalize hijabis. And I think that's important because if we start to see hijabis as non-human, it increases violence against them. So there's an important aspect of showing these people who do exist in the real world as human beings in media, as women who wear the hijab. But at the same time, I think we have to be really vocal in our critique of it so that we're criticizing the idea and that it dies out, whilst also acknowledging that there are some women who wear hijab and they should be treated as people.
I 100% agree with that. You know, I don't go up to individual hijabis and criticize, you know, their, you know, I don't say, why are you wearing that or whatever. But, you know, it's more the concept of it that I have an issue with. And, you know, the misogyny that it's rooted in and this sort of purity culture and the shame culture that it comes from. I do have mixed feelings about the representation on TV because then you end up with that being shorthand for a Muslim, which sort of erases the experiences of Muslims who don't wear hijab and makes hijab almost like required to be a Muslim, which is not the case. Like there are lots of Muslims who, you know, don't wear hijab. But, you know, there is a lot of nuance and a conversation to be had about that. That could probably be its own podcast.
That could probably be its own podcast, definitely.
But anyway, speaking of that, like I don't want to go down this whole rabbit hole, which I mean, like I think it would be a really fun talk. I want to thank you guys both for your time. If you have anything you want to say, please go ahead. If you want to put out your socials, you can say them now, or if you want to send them to me later, I'll put them in the description when we release it. We should be releasing it next week. So thanks again, guys. If you have any last words.
No, nothing for me. I'm kind of interested in what is the future for gay Muslims and gay ex-Muslims, and I just want to see us continue to redefine that ourselves, like not at the hands of our oppressor. Make a space for yourselves, whether you're gay Muslim or gay ex-Muslim. Craft that space in the way that you want it, and rather than beg for the respect and acceptance, demand it and generate it on your own terms.
Yeah.
Any last words from you, Heina?
Well, yeah, no, I'm watching the developments in various communities with great interest and cheering people on and being the bad influence that I want to be.
Yeah.
Hey, well, thanks a lot again. Thanks again, you too. And thank you everyone for listening. And please like and share and click the little bell to get notifications. And we'll be back soon. Thanks a lot.